I don't work around consensus. And if I worked around consensus, I wouldn't be where I am in the economics department, in my own department, because we don't have a consensus. The consensus panel comes out of something called the Delphi method, which was established by the Rand Corporation in 1955 or something like that. I think it had a foreign policy objective. I haven't done enough research on the Delphi method to be very cogent about it, but what's indicative for me is when I would ask questions to Elizabeth or to David about it, it was always Elizabeth who would answer, maybe for the name in both of their names, but it wasn't him that was answering me. I didn't get clear answers. I mean, she used to be a medical librarian in Canada, in Vancouver, Canada. She's retired now, and it was clear that she had been exposed to the Delphi method being used in the medical field, and I suspect she mentioned it to Griffin, and he bought into the idea. I suspect. Okay, I suspect that's the origin of why they decided to use the Delphi method.
Can you?
But she herself is not a researcher. She never was, and so I think that she doesn't have that experience of, you know, like if for example, I'm an econometrician, and there's methods we use in econometrics, and I know that everything you use has controversy, and that's good. I mean, it's healthy. You know, you have pluses and minuses of anything you use, but when you ask her to elaborate on the Delphi method, she doesn't seem really capable of having even penetrated the literature on the pluses and minuses. The only thing we have is we get a point from the top down. Two people send us a point. We cannot talk to each other, okay? We evaluate independently of each other, which there are some pluses to that, okay? But the problem is, and I'm going to show you it really becomes significant, the problem is, suppose I catch something or somebody else catches something that I didn't catch, and I convey it to them and they don't convey it back to the other panelists, okay? The other people continuing to vote, sometimes on something that really it should be exposed to everybody, but they don't do it, okay? And that's part of the control is they decide what gets exposed to everybody among the 20 plus people who are looking at these points. And initially they did give some feedback, not very much, but a little bit, and I can explain one in particular. But in the recently they haven't been giving any feedback. They just said, this is the vote. One of the things I did, and in their removal statement to me, they told me I caused more trouble than everybody else put together. Okay, and I didn't cause that much trouble. I did. What do I mean to say by that? I mean, I wrote. They kind of thought that if they write to all the panelists, well, we react only to them. So they BCC us, and we react only to them. No BC, no CC, BCC, or anything like that to anybody. Okay, I always thought that meant just for the points themselves, whether it's good or bad on the points themselves. It was not on the process. So twice, I went to all the panelists and asked questions about the process, about the Delphi process, basically kind of like, what is this process? Why don't we have more discussion among, not by name, but by issue? Okay, I did that twice, okay? That led them to, first of all, a number of people on the panel agreeing with me, some disagreeing with me, but, you know, there was a discussion about that. But anyway, that itself caused them trouble, because they had to come to a conclusion about just the issue of the process. The process is too top down. I was trying to democratize, at least to some extent. One of the people who resigned, namely Shelton Langford, says that they're serving as a gatekeeping function, which means exactly only you can go so far. Another person interprets it as a limited hangout, which means that they are setting up a situation where a certain blame can be leveled at the U.S. government, but not too much. That's what a limited hangout means. You know, I don't feel strong enough about the Delphi method to say that it always is used in a manipulative context. But I will say that in the context we, in the 9/11 movement, we're experiencing from David Ray Griffin and Elizabeth Woodworth, is they define what questions we ask. Only, by the way, this is kind of interesting. When I did make my objections to the Delphi method, or what their method of interpretation of the Delphi method, when I was making the objections, they did make a concession that the fifth set of points, no, it's not the next set, we're on the third now, not the fourth, but the fifth, which maybe isn't in the fall or late summer, that then at that point the panelists could propose their own questions. Okay? That sounds democratic, but there's a hidden thing there, okay? If for example, let's take citizen investigating team. Let's take the Pentagon issue. In the past, they were the ones that presented the points to the panelists. So it had, quote, their authority behind even asking the question. You get to the fifth set of points, then you know this is coming from one individual panelist, not the moderators. Okay, you will know that, okay? And furthermore, that panelist is not now allowed to vote on that item, okay? So I think it's going to create a kind of a culture. If panelists do it, it's going to create a kind of hesitancy on their part, because they will know that it's not the leadership of the consensus panel that's proposing the point, it's one of us. You know, not all of us are all that good, quote unquote, if you know what I'm kind of saying. In other words, I will now know, if I'm on the panel, I will now know that this is not coming from the leaders. Now actually, from a Democratic point of view, fine, great, but that hasn't been the way the thing is done all the way up to that point. So that change is kind of a change for failure, not for success.